listening to The Frankie Boyer Show. Once again, here's your host, Frankie Boyer.
I have to tell you, welcome back, everybody. I was so excited for Janine Stiene to be with us today. She is the visionary creator of something that no one really is talking about. Your tongue. She is the creator of something called Spot Pal, and it emphasizes the importance of proper tongue resting posture. And this is the first ever tongue training appliance designed to train the tongue to rest up in the palate and not against the teeth. When I first started going to some of the airway conferences with Howie and with Michael Gelb, I was blown away, Janine, blown away, Jeannie, blown away by the information about the tongue. I never knew what tethering was. I never understood the power of the tongue and all of the importance it holds. And we just don't hear about this in the news. Tell us your background and how you got in. Not at all. And so tell us your background and what was it as a speech pathologist that you realized?
So I am a speech pathologist, started working in the school district and doing articulation and traditional speech therapy. And it wasn't until someone mentioned this concept of myofunctional therapy that I had never heard, never experienced, never was exposed to, and took some time to do my own research and digging, that I realized the benefit and the importance of myofunctional therapy and how it's so necessary to work with the cause of a problem and not just the symptoms of a problem. And a lot of things, especially associated with speech-language pathology, articulation, breathing, muscle strength, agility, all of those things have a cause. And so often we're just treating what the symptoms are that the patient is presenting with, but not really dealing with the functional issues. And those functional issues are really what are going to provide that long-term success. So ultimately, we were just providing Band-Aids. Let's just treat this, bandage it, treat this, bandage it. And it wasn't until I started learning that if you treat the cause of the issue, which obviously sounds, of course, that's how you're supposed to address it. It wasn't until I realized how the benefit of treating from the cause that you really started to see this long-term success, but across so many different medical specialties and so many different platforms. So we weren't just changing the patient, the way the patient was able to articulate, but we were changing the shape of their oral cavity, changing the shape of their palate, actually the shape of their face, how they could breathe, how they could sleep. And it was just eye-opening.
So fascinating. Explain to everybody what myofunctional therapy is.
Yeah, so myofunctional therapy is a program designed to reteach the brain how to swallow. So we are all born as tongue thrusters and the only way I can describe that is when you think of an infant and you first give them baby food and more food winds up on their face and on their tray or on their high chair than in their mouth. So we're all born with a tongue thrust. That tongue thrust is traditional and it's normal and part of development. But we are supposed to outgrow that. And if we don't outgrow it, instead of our tongue pushing our food up and back towards, obviously, into the throat and down into the stomach, we're pushing our food forward. And our tongue is a strong muscle, as strong as our heart. So it doesn't matter if there's bone or if there's braces or Invisalign or anything interfering, the tongue is always going to win. So if we don't treat and teach the tongue to swallow the right way or to sit in the proper position, then all of these other parts of the body, all of these other areas start to become affected. So myofunctional therapy is really designed to re-educate that neuromuscular system in hopes of regulating so many other areas of the body.
So I mentioned tethering of the tongue, and I want you to share with all of us if this is wives' tale or if it's true, so that midwives used to keep a very long baby fingernail, and they would just sliver. So everybody under your tongue, it's like I hate to say it's like a string, but it really is kind of like a string under the tongue, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. It's a lot of times. So no, that is not an old wives' tale. And it's funny in the world we live in now, in terms of, you think of, oh my God, they just went through the nursery and with their fingernail, they cut all of these tethered oral tissue, or what we call a tongue tie. Oftentimes it's really starting to grow in terms of understanding and knowledge base. And there's still a long way to go with it, Frankie, with regards to understanding the impact of a tethered oral tissue or a tongue tie, and when intervention is necessary. And at the end of the day, the tongue, the middle of our tongue, is supposed to be able to make contact with the top of our mouth. And it should do so without moving any other structures. So the mouth should be able to remain open. The tongue should be able to make that contact. But if you have to move your lower jaw, move any other part of your body to move your tongue, chances are there's something restricting that movement, and other structures start to compensate. And that's often where we see patients that develop temporomandibular joint disorder, or you'll see that they have posture issues or neck strain, or even just the way their shoulders rest. All of that is secondary to this tethered oral tissue that they say starts in your mouth and goes all the way to your toes, that fascia. So it does affect everything.
It's so fascinating that we don't know about this, that we don't understand that that's exactly where tongue-tied, that term tongue-tied came from, that if we do not have a tethered tongue, that sometimes learning disabilities, the brain doesn't get enough air. The whole story of the mouth and oral health and this placement of the tongue is, I just don't understand why we don't have more people like you talking about this.
It's definitely one of those areas that's something that I work towards and advocate for. And like I said, we're still a long way away, but I will say I definitely have seen a positive shift in the last 3 to 5 years, where we're starting to hear people talking about tethered oral tissue more. We're starting to see more providers intervening with tethered oral tissue. It used to be an argument, and we would refer a patient and they'd say, nope, they can move their tongue, they're fine. But no one was thinking about all the other factors. Yes, they can move their tongue, but at what cost? What else are they sacrificing?
So this is that's why I wanted you on, because I find this conversation, when Howie and Michael come on the show and have talked about airwaves, and the fact that if you're getting an appliance, if you're getting anything that has to open the airwaves, or again, we're not getting enough oxygen, and full 3D X-rays of the face, of the head, can show exactly where your airwaves are. And again, we are not talking about this. Most people have not a clue if their airwaves are open or not.
No, and what's very disheartening is that, as a country or as a rule, we act in a reactive way. So anytime you go to the doctor, if it's not for your physical, you're going because your ear hurts, your head hurts, your nose is congested. But we don't look at anything else when we're there. We're looking at what the issue is at that time. So unless there's something physically presenting itself in that moment that would point to, this is why my airway is compromised, or I do present with some sort of tongue tie, lip tie, some tethered oral tissue, where nobody's exploring it, nobody's looking for it, and oftentimes the providers don't know what they're looking for. So there's so much more education that is necessary, and definitely some of the things they're working towards is making that part of routine screenings, making it part of routine physicals, because, what goes hand in hand with that is the whole sleep disordered breathing concept. And you're hearing more and more individuals that are presenting with sleep disordered breathing and sleep apnea. But again, nobody's looking for that proactively.
And again, mouth opening, people think it's really cute when they see a baby or anyone with their mouth open when they're sleeping, and it's just the opposite. It has deleterious effects to your health when you sleep with your mouth open. It takes years away from your lifespan when your mouth is open when you sleep.
Absolutely.
And you need to train your mouth to be closed when you sleep. And it's a hard thing for people to understand, but when we come back, we have to get ready for a break. You need to tell us how we get Spot. It's called Spot Pal. How you founded this, how it works. We have so many details here. Give us the website, and when we come back, we can talk a little bit more. Is it like a retainer?
It's very similar to a retainer, but a lot less intrusive, a lot more manageable and easier to wear, so it's not interfering with quality of life, articulation, and not visible to the naked eye for the most part.
And how do we know we're getting the right one? And when we come back from break, do we have to go to a dentist to get it?
You do not have to go to a dentist. You can go directly to our website at spotpal.com, and you can take a quiz, and it will actually tell you if you're a candidate for SpotPal or not. And then since it's customizable, we will work through it with you and make sure that the appliance fits exactly to your needs and your mouth or different characteristics.
Okay, well, we'll take a quick break and be right back. This is Frankie Boyer. Stay tuned. WCRN, WADK, and WNKC. Stay tuned.
So would I.
Now the Frankie Boyer Show continues. Once again, here's your host, Frankie Boyer.
Welcome back. It is Frankie Boyer, WCRN, WADK, and WNKC, and I'm excited about this conversation because we need to really understand how to breathe free, open the airway. We have to train and retrain. And Spot Pal is the website, and please, Janine, spell it for us.
Yes, it is the Spot, SPOT, PAL, PAL.com.
Wonderful. You created this, how, why? Tell us.
So as a myofunctional therapist for the last 20 plus years, you start to see obviously a plethora of patients, but also a plethora of limitations with the appliances that are on the market, and how many appliances that are just not conducive when working with patients, especially those that have a tongue thrust or that have tethered oral tissue or who are in clear aligners. So over the years, you start to say, okay, this is a limitation of this appliance, this is a limitation of this appliance. It really needs to be this, this, and this. And then COVID came, fast forward, and COVID happened, and we were performing so much therapy through telemedicine or through the computer, and I couldn't guarantee effectiveness or accuracy because I couldn't see what was happening. I clearly couldn't see in their mouth.
Of course.
So there came the Spot Pal, is that, I can create appliance, it can fit to our patient's mouth, it can fit to the needs of our therapy, our patients, and also allow for the same effectiveness working next to someone as we can through the screen. And, in today's society, we need to be able to switch and adapt on a dime. And this appliance, as we were working through all of our prototypes, we were able to figure out a way that we could effectively provide treatment while also meeting the needs of our patients and the needs of our therapy.
I think this is so awesome. Now, how how do you measure the mouth? I mean, how my mouth is going to be different than your mouth.
Absolutely. And I think that's one misunderstanding or misnomer that's out there, is that everyone thinks everybody's structures look exactly the same in the oral cavity, and they don't. Where my tongue should rest and where your tongue should rest essentially should be in the same place. However, the way the inside of my mouth looks and the way the inside of your mouth looks is so different. And that's what's so fantastic about this appliance. So you can either go to a dentist or an orthodontist who has the ability to do an intraoral scan, and they can send us the scan directly, or we'll send a putty kit where they actually will take an impression and send the impression to us.
I was going to say, so it's an impression. It's an
Yes.
impression done.
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm looking at the before and the after pictures with the spot pal, and what am I noticing here?
So what we want you to notice is that with most traditional clear aligner appliances, the acrylic is so thick on the teeth that when the patient tries to occlude or to bite down, it creates a space because it's not allowing the teeth to touch. So what was important for me is that the acrylic was thin enough so that the patient could completely occlude, because if there's a space, the tongue is going to find it. So if we work to break a tongue thrust habit, and now this patient goes into a clear aligner and the aligner is creating that space, well, we've just created a place for that tongue to go right back to the habit we just broke. So I wanted to make sure that they could occlude completely. But the other thing that was important is that they were able to contract their masseter muscles, which are in their cheeks. And when we swallow, the only muscles we should use are our tongue and our masseters. And individuals that are tongue thrusters, they are unable, or they don't have any masseter movement or strength because they can't bite down and they keep that bite open. So my purpose was to make sure that they can keep their bite, that it was as natural looking as possible so that we could carry it through for those pediatric patients that are in an educational setting, and it's not going to be something that's insanely visible, but also allow for us to give them the most naturalistic looking appliance, and not create that space, so that we could really encompass what we were working towards in therapy and long term.
All right. All of this is so important. So you really want to train the tongue tip to rest by placing the tongue tip on where it needs to go in the mouth.
Correct. So the spot pal is doing two things. One, it allows for a little hole, which we call the spot dot, and that's the target. That's where your tongue should sit. But in addition to that, there's a little bumps or a little spikes on the back of the teeth. So if the tongue doesn't find that spot dot and it happens to hit the teeth, it's going to be reminded, nope, I'm too far forward. I need to move back. And what we're giving it that place. So it's not just hitting those spikes and saying, okay, well, I know I'm not supposed to be here, but where am I supposed to be? And the benefit, too, is that because the appliance is customizable, we can move that spot dot wherever it is pertinent to that patient. So everybody's spot, which is why we call it the spot dot, is in a different place. And if we have to cheat it back a little bit so that we can give them a little more wiggle room, so if their tongue does slide forward, we're able to do that. So we're working on building their muscle memory, but we're actually able to specifically provide that spot.
How long in the day do you want us to be wearing this appliance?
So when you first get the appliance, we have our patients build up. So they're wearing it for a few minutes a day. And then each day they'll wear it a little longer. And then we start to train them to do activities or do their exercises or do these tasks without the appliance. And what's amazing is that once the appliance comes out, the mouth still has that tactile sensation or that chew of where the tongue was supposed to meet. So sometimes after a few hours, a few days, your tongue goes right to that spot. But then all of a sudden you'll say, okay, you know what? I feel like it's slipping again. Let me put my Spot Pal back in. Let me get that reminder back. Let me work on that muscle memory. And we put it back in, and then we can do the same thing. What's nice about this, too, is that it's really hard. The long term for our resting posture and swallowing, the most important part is that subconscious. And that's the hardest part to ascertain. That's the hardest part to remediate. So with the Spot Pal, patients are sleeping with it in because it's not interfering, but it's also allowing them to sleep more restfully because it's keeping their tongue
where the
up
tongue wants to be naturally. That's right. So the body can finally rest.
Correct.
The body will finally be at rest when your tongue has a home where it needs to be in your mouth. It sounds so crazy, but it's really so important. And it adds to the opening of the airway passages.
Absolutely. And that's such a big, important part of growth and development, especially from that pediatric population all the way through adulthood.
Oh my gosh, of course, even to seniors, of course. Now, what if you have dentures? What if you have partials? What if you have bridges, that kind of thing? What do you do with that?
So, as I had said, every appliance is customizable. So we can adjust the appliance based on each individual person's dentition, each individual person's appliances that they present with in their oral cavity. So we can specifically make any adjustments to the appliance based on how that patient comes to us and what they present with. And the dentures in particular, that's some of the patients we see more regularly, especially as we're aging, and those muscles start to get weaker and weaker, and the tongue is pushing those dentures out. It won't allow the lips to contain those dentures. So this is important for that population and that generation as well.
This is so wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful things. Good for you. And what are the dentists saying?
The dentists are calling it the missing link in dentistry, which is amazing.
It is the missing link, yeah.
The missing link in dentistry.
Out of time. Okay, it's THE, thespotpal.com, THE, spot, SPOT, pal, PAL.com. This has been absolutely fabulous. I'd love to have you back because there's so much more we didn't get to, but I want everyone to check it out and look at the website because there's so much great information. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Frankie, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and bringing some more light on this topic. That's such an important topic.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time right here on the Frankie Boyer Show. This is Frankie Boyer, WCRN, WADK, and WNKC. Thanks for listening. Make it a great day, everybody. And as always, smile.
Maybe ever so